Coming up tonight on Student News, are students getting too little sleep? The Amherst schools investigate shifting the school start time, and we're there with the youth perspective.
Osama bin Laden was enemy number one for the majority of every teen's life. We've got the youth reaction to his death tonight. And yes, we were gone for a month. We're back. We missed you. And now, like your college roommate, you just can't get rid of us. Why? Because it's May 23rd, 2011, and Student News starts right now. Good evening. I'm Joshua Wolfson.
And I'm Allie Charrington.
And now, to the headlines.
A new study released last week in the journal School of Health finds that lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender teens who are bullied and harassed in middle and high school have a higher likelihood of mental and physical ailments later in life. The data collected from the Family Acceptance Project's Young Adults Survey linked LGBT victimization in teen years with impaired mental health, depression, suicide attempts, the contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, and a higher risk for HIV. Those LGBT students who reported low levels of harassment were found to have higher self-esteem and life satisfaction as young adults. The survey was taken by 245 LGBT young adults ages 21 to 25. The study found that those LGBT young adults who had high levels of victimization in adolescence were 2.6 times more likely to report clinical levels of depression and 5.6 times more likely to have attempted suicide than those who experienced lower levels. The study's lead author, Stephen T. Russell, professor at the University of Arizona, said, quote, "We now have evidence of the lasting personal and social cost of failing to make our schools safe for all students. Prior studies have shown that school victimization of LGBT adolescents affects their health and mental health. In our study, we see the effects of school victimization up to a decade later or more. It is clear that there are public health costs to LGBT-based bullying over the long term," unquote.
On May 4th, a group of environmental activists filed a lawsuit against the federal government in the U.S. District Court in San Francisco, and the majority of the individual plaintiffs within the group were teens. The New York Times reported that the lawsuit charged that key federal agencies had failed in their duty to protect the Earth's atmosphere for future generations. The group, called Our Children's Trust, has the mantra, quote, "Our climate, our future, our revolution." Our Children's Trust's website highlights itself with text reading, quote, "Kids versus the government." The main page goes on to say, quote, "Youth have the moral authority and the legal right, as the generation most affected by the climate crisis, to demand that our governments protect the atmosphere for our future. We don't have the money to compete with corporate lobbyists, and we may not yet be able to vote, but we do have a legal right to insist that the planet is protected for our future and for generations to come. There's currently a similar case before the Supreme Court, which has yet to be decided. There have also been a number of bills in Congress to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, but nothing has been approved by both the House and the Senate." Georgetown University environmental law expert Lisa Heinzerling told the New York Times, quote, "Part of this is keeping the issue alive in lots of different settings and having all the branches, including the courts, continually react to it."
In March, we reported that the teen job market was going to look pretty slim for the summer. And we're sorry to say there's more bad news on the way. The unemployment rate for youth ages 16 to 19 was up to 23% in April, almost 3 times the national unemployment rate of 9%, according to figures from the Department of Labor Statistics. The teen unemployment rate has been astronomically high the past 2 years compared to previous years. As this graph from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows, the 19.1% teen unemployment rate experienced in July 2010 was almost double the 9.6% unemployment figure in July 1950. Minority youth have been even more adversely affected by comparison, with the unemployment rate for African American teens at 37.5% last month, compared with the 23% figure overall. It's been a tough job market for everyone, and youth especially are getting hit pretty hard. It doesn't look like it's going to be getting better anytime soon, either.
Here at Student News, from time to time, we like to bring you the crazy, kooky, and downright insane stories from the news relating to youth. And usually, public schools take the biggest hits in these stories. But since we like to show everyone some love, we've got a couple of stories from the ever-elusive world of charter schools. Out in the fertile land of Dayton, Ohio, a charter school there, the Dayton View Academy, is punishing a 14-year-old girl by barring her from their 8th grade prom and a class picnic. The student, while on a field trip, witnessed two other students, having sex on the bus and later told her mother about the incident, who then contacted school authorities. So, on what grounds did they suspend her? She didn't tell the chaperones fast enough. Sandra Roundtree, the mother of the girl, thinks that the punishment sends the wrong message, telling the Associated Press, quote, "It sends the message that she shouldn't have said anything at all." It's understandable that sometimes it's difficult to keep order in a school, and many different tactics need to be employed, but punishing your informants is just ineffective. And now we come back here to the Pioneer Valley, where the Daily Hampshire Gazette reported on April 14th that state officials are investigating the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School for allegedly confining a 9-year-old boy to a 4-foot by 8-foot room for 8 hours on March 25th. The principal, Kathleen Wang, called the incident, where the boy was also not allowed to see a nurse or call his mother, an, quote, in-house suspension. The boy's mother has said that he's afraid to leave the house without family members coming along for fear of being kidnapped by the principal. Just another way lifelong learning is being promoted in today's schools.
Waking up in the morning for school is something that students all across America dread. And the awfulness of waking up for school is compounded by the early hours at which high school students have to wake up, many waking up around 6 a.m. after keeping late hours the previous night.
In an attempt to give teens more resting time, the Amherst schools are contemplating moving the school start time later. One option would move all school start times later by a half hour, while the other would flip the regional start time of 7:45 a.m. with the elementary school start time of 8:20 a.m. With students' thoughts on this possible shift, we turn to Student News reporter Tess Dome-Sadoff. Take a look.
So on an average school day, I get up at 6:20, eat lunch, whenever I have lunch, I guess at like 11 or 10 or something. And then I go to sleep at midnight, yeah.
Okay, well, I live like real close, so I usually wake up at around 7. I wake up at like 6:40, but I stay in bed until 7. I don't really eat lunch because the school food's horrible, so I'll have like a snack when I get home and then eat dinner. And then what was the last question?
What time you go to sleep?
Oh, that depends on like, I try to go to sleep at around 11, but like if I have a lot of homework or if I'm just stupid and want to stay up late, then I can go to sleep as late as 3 or 4.
For me, I usually wake up around 6:30 to 6:45 on an average school day, and then I get a ride to school, so around like 7:20 to 7:25 is when I leave, but I don't really like it. I like it better like when I can sleep in more because I don't go to bed way too late. I go to bed around 11:15, but I mean, it's just I'd rather sleep more.
On an average day, I wake up at like 5:45 or 6, and I have lunch. I usually have last lunch, so like 11:30 or noon, I think is the time, and then I go to bed at like 10:30 or 11.
On a normal morning, I wake up at 6:40, and then I usually have lunch from like 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, depending on like first or fourth lunch, and I go to bed around 10:30 or 11 normally.
Okay, I usually get up at 6 a.m. and I usually eat lunch at 11, and I usually go to bed at midnight.
Like D period after lunch, people fall asleep a lot, or A period, but I mean, I don't see it as happening too much.
Freshman year, when I first started getting used to the school system, so I'll be staying up around 12:30 or 1 in the morning, and then, or I'll pull an all-nighter after a test for like a huge test, usually for a little tip, and then I would sleep in, or like I would just even sleep in and then take the test, and then sleep in class after I take the test. Also, sometimes I'll just be after like a basketball tournament or like a big game, I'll be tired still, and then just even now, right now, I don't have anything. I did have stuff, but I've still slept during class.
Oh God, yes, yes. Most often it's study hall, but this year it's been all over my schedule.
I actually haven't ever fallen asleep in class, but I've noticed that lots of people do.
Have you ever wanted or felt like you
Yeah,
could be falling
definitely.
asleep?
I've tried to fall asleep in class and like close my eyes and stuff, but I've never actually fallen asleep.
Many times.
Do you think it's a rarity at the high school to fall asleep in class?
No, not at all.
Plenty of people fall asleep in classes. It's pretty bad.
It's just, I mean, I feel like an hour in the morning is just a more important than an hour in the afternoon. It's like the afternoon you have for practice, you have the hours of 2 to like, I've had practices that went as late as 7 or 7:30. Whereas in the morning, it's like, there's not a lot of time in the morning, unless you want to get up at like 4, but like, that's not gonna happen.
For sports, I like it that I can have a practice at 3:15, like for basketball, and like every sport's usually 3:15. So you can like, just after school, you have that little, like a good time frame for like 40 to an hour, like 40 minutes, 45 minutes to a 55 minutes time period of you can actually stay after school and do your work or go grab food at like Primo's or do whatever you need to do. And like for the people that can drive, they can go to their house and get their stuff.
Most sports don't get home until 5, 6, or even 7, and so then if you move it an hour later, they don't get home till 6, 7, or 8 o'clock, which, like, then you have to start homework. It just seems, I think it would be too late.
I guess the only other thing is jobs. There are jobs where the hours are like 3 to whenever, and you wouldn't be able to make the 3 o'clock shift.
Obviously, there would be a few, like a little less time in the afternoon, but the extra sleep is invaluable to me. So, even if I don't have as much time for all my after-school activities, I would, maybe fall asleep in class a little less.
Most families have dinner before 8 o'clock, and it's just, like, as it is, I don't get to see my sister that often, and we live in the same house. So it wouldn't make sense for me to stay out later and never see my family.
Time in the morning is just more valuable than time in the afternoon.
How do you see moving the start time like an hour later affecting your ability to focus and succeed in school?
I mean, I'll be happier to be here, which means that I'll be happier to do my work, and life won't. No, that sounds depressing. School will be easier to get through.
Well, I think that students would be more focused in school, so they'd appreciate what they're learning more and pay more attention.
Well, I definitely have more energy than usual, having gotten a lot more sleep.
I feel better. I just am more refreshed.
I kind of like it the way it is. I like having my afternoon to do whatever I need to do, because I do a lot of stuff outside of school, so it's good for me to have like 6 hours before dinner to like do what I need to get done. I could see moving it half an hour later, but I feel like it wouldn't help. It would just shift everything an hour later. So like everybody would still go to bed an hour later than they do now, do homework an hour later than they do, and so like it wouldn't change sleep schedules. It would just move everything in relation to the day.
I think that moving, if you moved it a whole hour, it might be a little hard for sports, especially fall sports when the sun is going down earlier in the late months, starting towards winter. But a half an hour would probably give enough time for those kind of things.
It's going to bump things a little later, but most parents don't get out of work until later anyways, so kids and parents will probably be arriving home at the same time. And, I mean, most kids that I know are nighttime people anyways.
I do stuff in the afternoon, and so school ending at 3:20 might cut into, my responsibilities a little. But, getting up at 8:30 is not that different from getting up at 6:30, so a little later would be nice.
I'm not sure if 30 minutes would make that much of a difference, but I do think that starting late would be a better idea, because even just an hour later, because it doesn't affect the end of the day that much, there'd still be time for after-school activities.
Definitely an hour. I mean, personally, I have a lot of time after school, and I do extracurriculars and stuff. I'm not just like a slacker, but I have easily enough time to complete all my homework. As it is, I don't think 1 hour will change that very much. and getting to school 1 hour late is huge. That's massive, especially like in the winter when you have to get up and it's still pitch black out. That's the worst.
If you change the start time, we still need to address other things, because if we still have the same amount of homework and the same exact extracurriculars, if you just push the school start time back, then school ends later, then everything will go later. So you'll go to bed an hour later or half hour later. So you'll still get that short amount of sleep that you are getting now. So I think that starting later is a good idea, but it's not the only thing that needs to be looked at to improve the issue.
Family stuff. If school were an hour earlier than it usually is, I mean, people adjust because of the schedule, the school schedule, and people could adjust to that school schedule if it changed. If it was already an hour later, then people would have adjusted to that already. So I don't feel like it would be that much of a change to do it a half hour, maybe an hour would be stretching it.
Thanks to Tess for that segment. Now we turn to a story that has both international and personal implications. Though he had attempted to carry out attacks in the 1990s, the first time most of today's teens heard the name Osama bin Laden was after the terrorist attacks he planned on September 11th, 2001, in which planes flew into the World Trade Center and into the Pentagon, killing thousands. These attacks occurred when today's high school students were in kindergarten through 3rd grade. In light of his death on May 1st, we turn to those in the Valley who have grown up in the shadow of the bin Laden attacks for their reaction to his killing. Zoe Langsdale has more.
How did you find out about Osama bin Laden's assassination?
I found out on Facebook. Right? Well, I went to school and everyone was talking about it, and so that's where I learned.
And how did you find out?
A friend of mine actually texted me, and then I looked it up online and on Facebook, and found out it was true.
I was in France on the exchange trip when I found out, and the Americans found out a couple of days after it happened, and somebody just brought it up.
I found out on Facebook.
Actually, well, I was on YouTube, and I was watching a music video, and it popped across the top of the screen. It said, "Breaking news, Osama bin Laden is dead. Watch the video now, live."
About the assassination?
I found out, I was on the New York Times, and then I saw it there.
So I found out from the assassination because I was on Facebook, and I was actually about to go to bed when Ian Maloney chatted me and said, "Turn on CNN right now." And so, of course, I sprinted. CNN is one of my favorite channels after all, so turned it on, and the president was going to give a speech for 30 minutes or so. So I sat there, and then there was speculation that Osama bin Laden was killed. I ran upstairs, got everyone in my family, we went downstairs and we watched it.
What was your reaction?
I was shocked. I didn't really realize that they were looking for him so much. But, yeah, I was shocked. I guess I was excited that it happened.
Well, I mean, it's only natural for me to feel happiness at first because Osama was obviously a man who killed so many people during 9/11. So at first I was happy about it, but then I felt a little guilty in rejoicing his death.
I was surprised and a little bit worried about what would happen next, but yeah, a mixed feeling.
All the articles I read seemed so absurdly, joyous that he was dead, and I was a little bit confused by that, because it's just another person dying. I mean, of course he was very dangerous, and I'm happy he's not a threat anymore.
I mean, when it first happened, I was incredibly happy, in all honesty. I mean, I was celebrating and everything, not because that he actually died, and that I was celebrating the death itself, but more because of the symbol that I represented. And one of the reasons I actually moved here to Amherst, Massachusetts, is because I was from Montclair, New Jersey. My father worked in New York City, as did my mother. And so he, on the day of the attack, was about 2 buildings away. And so things along this sort, and plus the fact that Citibank, the building he was at, was very, very at risk for bombing, was one of the reasons we decided to move out here. And so, I mean, having friends in the building as well when it came down, I mean, it just seemed, very important to me. And so I was happy when it happened, and so I went out, got my American flag bandana, and the following day I wore it all day.
I was very happy. I was pretty shocked.
What was your reaction?
My reaction was wow, I thought he was dead 5 years ago.
At first I was like, I should celebrate, and then I was like, well, it's not really something to celebrate, but at the same time, really happy about it.
I think people are just like a little bit oh my god, obsessed with the fact that a man was killed. But he's a very dangerous man. I think that America feels safer, which is great.
And what do you think this means for the future of America?
The fight for terrorism is not going to end with just one death, a symbolic figure, but with the continued prosecution of what we continue to do, and people who want to destroy our ideals. I mean, it's one good step in the right direction, I'd have to say, if anything. And we can hope that with continued effort, we can hopefully lessen the powers of Hamas and all these terrorist organizations, and maybe one day even become allies with countries such as Tunisia and so on.
What do you think it means for the future of America?
I think that it's not something to celebrate about right now. I think that it's something that we're going to have to still be concerned about, and I think it would mean being more careful for a little while.
I think the thing it had the biggest impact on, it might not have changed the conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan that much, but it definitely helped Obama's cause with it. I mean, his approval rating went up like 13% on the first night, so I think that's pretty impressive.
I mean, I think it gave Obama sort of new popularity because it was something really that was wanted, and he completed it. So I think that's good for the country. I think it made a lot of people feel safer, but I don't really know how that affects the rest of the country.
I'm not really sure, but I definitely think that Obama's chance of re-election has increased. I'm not sure about the war on terror.
I think that we have one less terrorist in the world and one less bad person to influence.
Okay, great. It means that people will feel more secure, and that hopefully there'll be less terrorism.
Well, contrary to what everyone else thinks, doesn't mean the end of terrorism, and I hope people can realize that, because Al-Qaeda's been even better that we killed Osama bin Laden, and it's going to make it worse.
Thanks to Zoe for getting us that segment. That's definitely a topic with many different sides to it. Now over to Josh with the feel-good story of the week.
Thanks, Allie. Now, on this show, we've often made an issue of the fact that youth are one of the most disenfranchised groups in America. We can't vote, but our worlds are dictated by adults. Our opinions are generally ignored as too immature, but we're tried as adults in criminal court. Well, for tonight's feel-good story, we've got the story of high school sophomore Amy Myers of Cherry Hill, New Jersey, who has dived headlong into this country's divisive political climate with some ideas of her own. Last week, Myers challenged conservative U.S. Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann to a debate on civics and the U.S. Constitution, writing to her in an open letter that, quote, "As a typical high school student, I have found quite a few of your statements regarding the Constitution of the United States, the quality of public school education, and general U.S. civics matters to be factually incorrect, inaccurately applied, or grossly distorted." Myers went on to write, quote, "As one of a handful of women in Congress, you hold a distinct privilege and responsibility to better represent your gender nationally. The statements you make help to serve an injustice to not only the position of Congresswoman, but to women everywhere. Though politically expedient, incorrect comments cast a shadow on your person, and by unfortunate proxy, both your supporters and detractors alike are often generalized this shadow to women as a whole." She then challenged the Congresswoman to a public forum debate and or fact test on constitutional issues and U.S. history. No word yet on whether Congresswoman Bachmann will accept Ms. Myers' challenge. Now, it should be noted that Amy Myers lives in a different district than Michelle Bachmann represents, but she felt still, as Ms. Bachmann was a female U.S. Congressperson, that she should have the right to write her a letter.
Good for her.
She's got guts.
Yeah, women got to stick together, that's what I think. So we're done for the night. If you'd like more information about how to submit segments to the show or how to join our intrepid staff of writers, producers, or reporters and editors, check out the Student News website at www.riverwolfproductions.org/studentnews. At the site, you can also find out how to make a donation to the show so we can keep it going over here. Until next time, I'm Allie Charrington.
And I'm Joshua Wolfson. Stay strong and stay proud. Here's this evening's clip. Have a good night.
Do you like see it affecting like families in any sort of way?
Sorry, he asked the question again.
Do you see like this moving the start time later? How do you see it affecting families? Like if like let's say like a younger student gets home earlier than an older student, or like a elementary school student getting home earlier than a high school student.
Oh, okay.